Going from there to our mechanicals, we have the Wacom 3-blade, Rage Hypodermic, Grim Reaper 3-blade. This is a little bit older style, but it's a very good broadhead from our experience. And the Swacker 2-blade, and then the Swacker 3-blade. Alright guys, just before we get started, I just want to make sure we cleared this up. We have no affiliation with any of these companies. We are just simply trying to educate our clientele and all the guys that watch this video on a bunch of different broadheads. We are not here to bash any broadheads. We think most broadheads that are made today are good, clean killing broadheads. We're just trying to further your education in this product line. Thank you. Now on to expandables.
We have the Wacom 3-blade expandable.
Alright, there we go. Looking like they're expanding a little bit.
Got some real good penetration on that one.
Yeah, that is some awesome penetration through the 1/2-inch sheet of plywood.
That is.
And that was through a knot in the wood. Alright, let's check out the blade.
We broke one. Here it is right here.
Alright, if you look, there is one blade.
I bet that was the one that went through the knot.
Yeah, that sounds like a good possibility.
The blades are still really sharp though.
Yeah, the remainder blades are definitely in great shape.
That would still be close to 1.5 inches of cutting.
Yes.
But it did break.
It did break. Now let's look. It obviously, since the blade is sitting right there, it obviously broke after it made it through. So you were likely to have a 3-blade entrance wound of any animal you may shoot.
Next up for our expandables is probably the most famous, most well-known, and most widely used broadhead, the Rage Hypodermic.
That was a good shot, Zach. I think you hit the dot that time.
That is an awesome entry wound.
Yeah. Alright, well yeah, that performed very well on the entry. Didn't obviously get the penetration of the past ones. And
Broadhead right there.
The broadhead is still in the wood. Now obviously we could break that off. And
let's try to break it off, see if we can see the blades. Both of those blades are bent
back
a little bit, and they do not.
The sharpness is kind of, I mean, that one is still pretty good, but the one that took the most impact on the bend is dull. I mean, I can run my finger down it. And again, do not try this at home.
We're experienced professionals. This is a Grim Reaper 3-blade. It's an older broadhead, but still represents Grim Reaper.
Penetration wise, it did pretty good.
It's pretty decent.
There's not much of an entrance on the wood. I'd say about a 1/4 inch entrance on the blades.
But it definitely opened up. We have all 3 blades are still all intact. Not bent.
It bent the front of the front blade of the ferrule, but it's still, that is a replaceable tip, so still all in good. The back impact opened up that wood pretty good.
These are not that sharp. I mean,
again, this is an older broadhead, but it has never been used. It's a roughly about 3 years old. I've had it sitting in my broadhead tackle box since it was brand new. It has never been used.
Those blades dulled down a bit though. We have a Schwacker 2 blade. This is a 1.75 inch cut, 100 grain.
That's some good penetration all the way up to the veins.
The veins stopped it. If we would have shot a bare shaft, that would have gone all the way through.
And you can see where the wing blades of it impacted. The wing blades on a Schwacker kind of act as a sacrificial lamb, so it deploys as it hits. It begins to deploy. The wing blades take the full impact of, let's say, this board, hair, hide, and the rib cage. But as we go, obviously it's the best penetration one thus far. And then we go to the head. Alright, the head is still fully intact. I'm going to try to loosen it up so I can rotate it for y'all.
And it was opened up when we first walked over here.
Yeah. And then, if you look, these blades are fresh. Your main cutting blades are still fresh. They are just as sharp as they were before.
They're very short.
And the wing blades aren't bad themselves from what I can tell. I would say that is a definite pass.
This is our final broadhead for the mechanicals and for the entire test, and is a Schwacker 3 blade. This thing looks pretty nasty. And I did aim for this dot again, but that was only because
He hit so high before, so they had no impact against each other, as you can see. Well, going for this broadhead, you have your 3 little entrants, and it drove it even further than the 2 blade broadhead.
didn't expect that.
No, that usually when you get more blades, you get less kinetic energy through the impact, but this went even deeper. And now there's going to be folks that can test it, but as you can see, the other side from this broadhead had absolutely no impact difference because he hit high with the Grim Reaper and hit below the dot with the 3-blade Schwacker. So that did not alter the integrity of the wood. Alright, going down to the tip, or the head itself. Okay, there's all 3 wing blades still intact. Now they are the ones that take the blunt of the force.
Doesn't look like they're damaged at all.
The ferrule is still straight as far as I can see.
Blades are sharp.
Blades are just as sharp because remember, they didn't even cut anything. The wing blades did all the work there. They were deployed at the end of that board, and then you have fresh blades cutting what counts on the inside of the animal.
Moving on to the mechanicals, we're going to start off with the 3-blade Wacom, and as you can see, one of the blades fell off, ripped off. But after we looked at the slow-mo, and after we, just looking at the impact and everything, it looked like this one hit a knot in the plywood, which caused it to break. But in my mind, what if that was a rib, or maybe that was a harder part down to near the shoulder bone? There's multiple variables with that, but I mean, other than that, it performed very well. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it performed very well. If you actually look at the blades itself, especially the blade that came off, the blade is not broken. What broke on the blade is the screw that holds it into place. It's not. It's just that screw. You could probably get a new screw for this thing, put it on, and reshoot it, because there, besides that blade breaking off, there's no visible damage to it, you know, besides that aspect of it. It performed very well on the pass-through part of the penetration part of it. Not quite as far as some of the other heads, but it did say stout. I would have to give this one, you know, probably a 6. You know, it would have been ranked higher if that one piece wouldn't have broke. But out of this test on this day, I'd give it a 6.
I'm gonna have to go with a 5 for this, simply because it broke. I mean, if it would have been through a cleaner piece of wood and not hit that knot, it probably wouldn't have broke. But we have no way to really know that, unless shooting it, we shot it again, which that's the only one we have laying around right now. But I'm just thinking, you know, if you hit a rib on a deer or something along those lines, there's a good chance one of those blades breaking off. But at the same time, it still had plenty of penetration, and even with just 2 blades, there's still plenty of cutting radius right there. I mean, that's still 1.5 inches of cutting, and I mean, there's no damage. So up next, we have the Rage Hypodermic, and this is one of the more higher end broadheads. This is going to cost you a bit more, and you would expect it to perform a lot better than some of the other ones. But these blades have bent. They've bent a pretty good bit back after this these braces or whatever they are. But as you can see, they don't want to close back up. And from my standpoint, you know, you can't reuse it now. I mean, the ferrule is probably good. You can probably change out the blades, but you can't use these blades again, and that's going to cost you more money. And I would not trust it to shooting a deer again. What do you think?
Yeah, like Zach said, I wouldn't trust this. Trust these particular blades to shoot again. The ferrule seems to be in very good shape, as far as there's no visible damage that I can see. So putting a new set of blades on there, and a new shot collar, I believe that's what they call it, a new shot collar, you could probably reuse this head. But due to the blades being dulled to basically just straight steel without hardly any edge on it, and it doing that slight bend that it did.
And it also had no penetration. It was about,
Yeah.
it went just a tiny bit, probably a 1/4 inch farther than the Montec did. I mean, it was stuck in the wood, but we pulled it out.
Yeah, it was stuck in the wood. It did not go all the way through. And due to just the variables of it not sticking in, it not going through the board, and the blades bending, I'd have to give it a rating of probably, I would say right around a 3, just due to those facts. The ferrule stayed in good shape, so you could possibly reuse the ferrule. You would just need a new set of blades and a new collar.
My take, I agreed with that. I would have to give it a 3, because I mean, with these blades, you can't use it again. I wouldn't use it again. And with that lack of penetration, I mean, if you did hit a shoulder blade or something along those lines, it might not pass through that, and you wouldn't kill the deer. And it's not having good penetration, and that broadhead stuck in there. I mean, that deer might get an infection or something where the broadhead was, or it might just cause it problems, or it might have a really slow death and you never find it, and that's never good. So that one gets a rating of 3. And next up, we have our Grim Reaper 3-blade, and yes, it is an older design, but it's still a brand new blade. We got it right out of the box today. But after shooting that plywood, it had very, very respectable penetration, and the blades are just as sharp as when we first got them out. And the only visible damage, the only thing that we can see that was wrong with it is the tip of this thin metal is bent a little bit, not too much, but it is bent.
Yeah, and that's also easily fixed with these. The very tip of these airs are, you can unscrew them and replace the tip of the ferrule right there for a fresh blade. It held together very well. There's, besides that little tip being bent, and I'm talking about, it's not hardly bent at all.
Y'all probably can't see it.
You probably can't even see it, but I mean, it's just ever so slightly bent. And it's just the metal, it's not the ferrule itself, it's just the blade on the end of it. And it held together really well. If you could straighten that out, or put a new tip on it, that broadhead's good to go again. Yeah, so I decided to, I went with a solid 8 on this particular head, just because it performed flawlessly. Maybe a little bit higher if that blade wouldn't have bent just a little bit at the very tip, but it performed great. I mean, it honestly beat my expectations, and I've killed deer with this head, with a head just like this before, but it did a lot better than I could have ever really thought about doing.
Yeah, I mean, there's really no arguing. I mean, it's got to be a great head if it did that. So, I mean, I would trust this against the deer, so I'm gonna have to agree with the 8. I mean, it had very good penetration. I mean, it was as good as anyone that we've seen so far. No damage at all. So, and then moving on, we have the Schwacker 2-blade, 1.75, 1 3/4 inch cut, and this one, it penetrated all the way to the fleshing. There's no damage at all to the blades. The blades are still extremely sharp, and it still looks flawless.
Yeah, this broadhead performed extremely well. We had zero issues. I mean, I honestly think you could put another band around this broadhead and go out and use it again. I mean, not the very tip of the ferrule is, which is the most, one of the most vulnerable parts to hitting that plywood, didn't even bend. I mean, the tip's just as good as it was out the box, out the package. So this broadhead, in my view, would receive, a solid 8 to 8.5. So, I mean, it just beat all expectations. It looks brand new as far as all the blades, even the wing blades that took the blunt of the board. I mean, once it expanded, these blades are brand new. That never even touched the board. So, what do you think?
I had to give it a 9 just because, I mean, it's still, I mean, like he said, it looks brand new, and I would honestly put another one of those shrink wrap heat shrink bands on it and shoot this at a deer. I would trust that. I mean, there's no damage at all, so I gave it a 9.
So that puts us at an 8.5 between the two of us on that broadhead rating. And when you get higher, and when you start getting those awesome heads that are performing great, between that 8 to that 10, you really have to break it down and think about it to how can this broadhead, be better. Obviously, if that broadhead would have been shot up a little bit higher poundage bow or a longer draw length, it probably would have went straight through the board without any issue.
Rip the fletching off of there.
And rip the fletchings off the air and keep on going.
And then finally, we have the 3-blade Schwacker, which I'm pretty sure this surpassed both of our expectations by a long shot. Now, with the 3 wing blades on here, you have more surface area hitting that board and more of the broadhead taking that blunt force right out of the as soon as it hits. I figured it would have slowed down a whole lot faster than the 2-blade or any of them really, but from what we saw, I mean it penetrated farther than anything, and these blades still look absolutely brand new. They're still extremely sharp. Even the wing blades are still extremely sharp.
Yeah, and I believe we viewed this on the slow-mo, and you'll be able to see it when we'll have the slow-mo footage going, is that this head actually hits the blob target behind the plywood and bounces back a little bit.
Barely touched it.
Yeah, so it did by far out-penetrate everything else. And that's really, kind of, as the logic goes, the typical logic with a 3-blade broadhead, it doesn't penetrate as far as a 2-blade or, supposedly a fixed blade. And that's because it takes more kinetic energy to expand the head completely. But, I've killed deer with this broadhead, and it has been outstanding in the field. But I would have to say this broadhead would be, at that 9. The only reason it wouldn't be rated higher than that is because of it didn't go all the way through. It did not clear, the air did not go completely through the board. There's 0 damage done. I mean, put another band on this thing, you could go kill a deer with it.
I'd trust it with a hog or an elk or anything.
Yeah, I can't think of a North American animal that I would have any issues going hunting with that head.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, I say it's a 9.5. I mean, I can't give it a 10 because it did stop at the fletching, but I mean, going that far through a piece of plywood is really saying something about this broadhead and just the structural integrity of it not being damaged at all. I just want to recap on the broadheads. As far as the expandables, I would have to say, the 3-blade Schwacker, I mean, from this test, it far surpassed anything else. So.
Well, if you have any questions, comments, just drop them down below. We're Alabama Archery Academy. We're located in ATMORE, Alabama. Find us on Facebook. Like this video and subscribe. And when we post our next video, which we expect to do that in a couple weeks, we're going to do another video, and it's probably going to focus again on some broadheads. We'll see you soon. Thank you.